I have the distinct privilege and pleasure today of introducing to you one of the most remarkable people I know, Mrs. Tina Manousos. And Tina is not just a past client, but more importantly, I consider her to be a present-day friend to me and to my family. I've represented or had the opportunity to represent a number of profoundly injured people over the course of my years of practice, and what I can tell you is many want comfort, many want support, many want answers to questions. Tina wanted more. When I met her at Sunnybrook in the hospital bed after she was told she'd never walk again, she wanted a manicure. And that spoke volumes to me because she wasn't someone who was injured. She was a person who had everyday needs, and she wanted to be treated like a person, and that's something that wasn't lost on me from day one. If I had to use one word to describe her, it would be inspirational. And you know, I've said this to you before, but you have inspired me. You've inspired me to be a better lawyer and to be a better person, and I thank you for that. I'm going to turn this over to Tina shortly, but first I want to play for you a 10-minute video that we prepared as part of her legal case. It talks a little bit about life before an August 2004 crash and part of the journey thereafter. It's out of date because well, some years have passed since then, but then I will turn the microphone over to Tina and she can talk to you a little bit more about her journey.
Prior to the accident, we had a very busy lifestyle. It was very active. We did a lot of traveling. We went to Florida at least twice a year. We skied, we ocean, we did a lot of swimming, we golfed. Christmas and Easter and all those holidays, our home was always full because we always did the entertaining, and we had a lot of people over. Decorating for Christmas was a really big part culturally, but it was really great for me. So decorating the tree and big trees was something that we loved doing. My older son, Evan, has Asperger's syndrome. And prior to the accident, not only was I his mother, I was his playmate, friend. I was a lot of things to him, and we used to go on trips, just me and him, for weekends, just so he could get away and enjoy life, skiing trips. But since the accident, I haven't been able to carry on that, and unfortunately, he's become more reclusive and withdrawn. Over the past few years, I've had many falls, numerous ones, and even more near falls, and the frequency's increased even more over the last couple of years. With the bone density issues, it puts me at greater risk at suffering serious fractures as a result of a fall. I gotta stay down for a bit. How are you? Prior to the accident, I used to do laundry 3 to 4 times a week. large family, busy family. Kids were in a lot of sports, so there was a lot of laundry to do. I did it all. I took it down, did the laundry, folded it, brought it up, put it away, ironed, did all of that. Since the accident, I can't do it. The boys have taken over that responsibility. There are occasions where I have to help out, so I just kick it to the top of the stairs and, you know, throw it over, and then there's no way I can carry it up. I always have assistants carrying it up. It's just difficult. I have cut myself when I've had to cut vegetables, chop vegetables for meals because I don't have good fine motor skills, so it's very easy for me to cut myself. When I'm boiling water, I am able to take the large boiling pot of water and empty it into the sink, but it's an activity I avoid since my accident because it's very easy for me to burn myself, as I have on other occasions, because I don't feel temperature. I've lost sensory.
Bend the knees and come in. Good. All the way out. Both legs long. Lower both heels. Lift both heels. And bend and come back. And again. All the way out.
When I go to my therapies, physiotherapy and Pilates, I usually have someone drive me and bring me back because after the sessions, I am very fatigued and a lot of times very dizzy, and it's safer for me to be driven home and there.
I knew Tina before the accident. She was one of our most gifted students. She was very strong, very powerful athlete. She did all the advanced Pilates work, and she was so talented that we were trying to recruit her to be one of our teachers and to do the teacher training. Now working with Tina is a very different reality. It's working on just developing her strength and flexibility so that she can have her functional daily activities, so that she can be effective just in living her daily life.
Okay, just hold
We
on.
have to pull them from down there, otherwise they're going to rip.
Pull them enough?
I think so. Now they're okay.
Okay, they're pulled.
Yeah. And then we just cream.
Hold on.
Getting dressed can be a struggle for me. Having to do small buttons and cuffs on blouses, putting stockings on, all of that is tedious. Putting jewelry on, earrings, clasps on necklaces, it makes it a lot harder to do, and it was so much a part of who I was. I mean, even something as simple as putting on my jeans and, you know, buttoning my button or unbuttoning it when I have to go to the washroom gets difficult and complicated because I'm on sensory overload. So it's a challenge.
Turn that way. Hold on.
After my accident, the doctors they weren't optimistic about my recovery. And it's been 5 years of a lot of work. It's been a full-time job. But I've pushed through, and I've come this far, and I've proven them wrong. And I really want to keep working at this, and yeah, I'm not going to give up. Sloan, those words were too nice. I don't know if I can live up to those words, but thank you. So you know my name is Tina Manousos. I wanted to ask you, did you all watch the Olympics this summer and enjoy them? Yeah. I guess many of you stayed up really late at night to watch the athletes and then couldn't function at work the next day like the rest of us. Yeah. Well, it was wonderful to watch that, and I think Oscar Pretorius made quite an he had a success story, because I guess he sprinted with no legs, and he has quite an inspirational story. So it was really nice to see someone who has function issues or motor issues, and he ran in a race with able-bodied people and did quite well. So the world's changing. It's wonderful. About 8 years ago, during the time of the Olympics, that was August 22nd, 2004, I was injured in an automobile accident during the Olympics. My husband and my younger son were at home watching diving, I think it was, and early that morning of August 22nd, it was a Sunday, I had gotten up and gotten ready, got my 14-year-old son up, that he was my oldest at the time, and got him ready to take him to a golf tournament at the Bayview Country Club. So I got him there in the morning, and then afterwards headed over to see my parents. I hadn't seen them in 3 weeks. They were in Mississauga, and I thought I better go see them. While I was visiting with them, I wasn't feeling too great, but I was able, we just kind of plow through the day. And then it became afternoon, and it was time to go back and pick up Evan from the golf tournament. And I asked my mom to come along. She was very close to my oldest son. When he was born, I had to go back to work, and I mean, she was pivotal in raising him the first few years, so they have a very special bond, the two of them. So anyway, I persuaded her to come along, and she did. She came for the drive. And we went to the golf, the club, and we were waiting for Evan, and he was part of the last group that went out to play, so they were very delayed in coming back from their game. So as we were waiting, I started to progressively get worse. I don't know if it was gastritis, I had a bad stomach ache, I started to feel slight nausea. Anyway, Evan did come an hour later, and he said, just like a typical 14-year-old boy, "I'm hungry." What else is new? You're always hungry. All of you are hungry. I'm in a household of boys, so they're always hungry. So I said, okay, fine. He says, Mom, I just want to get a sandwich. I said, great. So it was an hour again for him to eat and drink his juice and everything. Anyway, when it was all over and we were heading to the car, I realized that there was no way I could drive home. I was in really rough shape. So before I walked out of the club, I grabbed 2 foam cups because I was anticipating that I was going to be vomiting in those cups because that's how sick I felt. And told my mother that she needed to take the wheel. She was very uncomfortable about doing that because she wasn't familiar with the area. She was used to driving in the vicinity of her home, but not used to driving outside that area. But my older son is Asperger's syndrome, and he's got some savant skills, and one of them is memorizing maps. So my 14-year-old could be dropped anywhere, even north of the city on a dirt road, and he could find his way home. So he had the project of delivering us home and guiding my mother and navigating her through the highways and getting her home, or getting us home. So he sat in the passenger seat, my mom took the driver's seat, and I sat behind Evan with my 2 cups because I did not want to vomit on our little black convertible. It was an old car, and I loved it, and I vacuumed it. It was beautiful. And the other thing is, my husband hated it. He didn't want the roof down ever because he says little stone chips go inside the car. And, what's the point of having a convertible if you can't take the roof down? So I always had the roof down, and then before I went home, I vacuumed it so that when the roof was closed when I went home, he thought I had never taken the roof down. So anyway, I couldn't vomit in this car. So we were driving, and Evan said to me, Mom, you know what? Grandma needs gas in the car. So I said, well, you know where the gas station is? Guide Grandma, fill the car up for her, take my purse, pay, and then get back in the car and, do your thing. So anyway, that's exactly what happened. He fueled the car. I was sitting in the back seat. It was probably the first and only time I didn't wear my seatbelt because I was so sick. And just the thought of having that belt against me, because it was an older car and the belts were tight, I didn't want it on me. And also, the side of the car, because it was a convertible, was so hard. And when you're not feeling well and you're leaning against something hard, it just makes everything worse. So I was behind Evan with the 2 cups. Evan guided my mom to leave the parking lot. I had my eyes closed. And then all of a sudden, I heard crushing metal. It was so surreal sounding, almost like a movie. It wasn't, I just thought I was watching a movie, but I did feel the car move around. It felt like the car was kind of tilting on 2 wheels on one end. But anyway, after the crushing metal sound stopped, I thought, okay, time for damage control. Something's obviously happened, an accident's happened, have to get up now. Well, I went to get up. Gave the command to the brain, time to get up, but the body wouldn't move. That is the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. To say, get up, and then not being able to get up. Immediately, fear envelops you, loneliness envelops you. I don't know, it was just the worst feeling. And I guess in my desperation, I called out within me, and I said, God, if you're there, I need you now. And I didn't hear an audible voice, but inside of me, I felt a comfort saying, I wouldn't give you anything you couldn't handle. So whatever that voice was to me meant, I was going to work hard, I was going to do my best, and I was going to come out of this. That's the way I took it, and I just waited for the next step. While this was all going on, I could hear Evan on the cell phone at the front. He was calling my husband and telling him an accident had happened. I heard him calling my dad, my brothers. In the meantime, I could also hear my mom screaming at the front and saying, move your car, move your car. She was in a lot of pain. Evan was telling Paul on the phone as I was listening that there's been an accident and Grandma's hurt. He said, Yaya's hurt. Yaya means grandma in Greek. And so we have to get to the hospital, he was saying. Well, the ambulance came in no time. They took my mother out and put her on a stretcher. I couldn't see all this. I'm just telling you this is what happened. I was lying in the back seat, and I had very long hair back then, and it had flipped over and covered my eyes, so I couldn't see anything. So I was hearing all of this. And then I heard Evan say, "Mom, I'm going with Grandma to the hospital." And I was so glad, because she was panicking, and she was in obviously a lot of pain. And her English was not the greatest, so Evan had to be there for her, and I was so glad he went. Well, then the paramedics were dealing with me. They came. I have to say that after, I guess, the crushing metal, it was all over, and after I said my prayer, my gastritis pain went away, but it was replaced with excruciating pain in my neck. I couldn't breathe. I felt I was gasping for air and lacking oxygen. Again, very difficult situation to be in. You can't move. You have this excruciating pain, and on top of that, you can't breathe. But I heard the paramedics, they were so encouraging, saying, "We're going to get you to the hospital. It's going to be fine." But I did hear them when they were on their radios trying to get me to Sunnybrook trauma unit. I did hear the word paralysis. So I guess eventually they were given the go-ahead to take me there. So it was bizarre, but when I was being lifted out of the car after the fire truck had cut the roof open and they put me on the stretcher, I felt so weightless because I had no proprioception. I had lost all sense of my body. So it was bizarre because I even felt that I was in a fetal position. I thought, well, they have me on a stretcher, so I can't be in a fetal position. I have to be flat out, lying flat. So I asked the paramedic, and he says, "Oh, no, you're flat." But I was trying to figure why I feel like I'm in a fetal position, but it must have been the last snapshot that my brain took before I was paralyzed. I got to the hospital, and there were a lot of doctors and nurses and a team that came over to look after me. I was just so impressed. They just started their tests. They started everything. Within a couple of hours, they had established that I had broken my neck at the C4 level. I was a quadriplegic. They were going to operate within 4 hours, and the surgeon was on his way and would operate at 6 a.m. So everything was under control. I had sustained no internal injuries. That was it. So they were right on top of things. My husband showed up and my youngest son, and they were very stressed out because they had just understood from Evan that there was an accident. But when they arrived at the scene of the accident, the police officers told them, "Sir, I have some good news. Your wife is still alive." So he didn't know what he was going to face when he came to the hospital. My little guy, my 11-year-old Jakey, my little hockey player, he just came right up to me, goes, "Mom, are you okay?" I said, "You know what? I'm going to be okay." So I tried to be brave for him. He's a little jock, a little tough little fighter, but I had to be strong for him. So I smiled. I told him, "I'm going to be okay." Well, they operated, and I guess it was next morning, I woke up in intensive care, and the doctor was there, and they started to ask me to move limbs. I didn't say that while I was lying on the gurney in emergency that I started to feel pins and needles in my hands and feet, but nothing was moving. So they asked me to move new things and different muscle groups, and I guess I had gained bicep movement, so I was able to do this sort of thing. I didn't have any triceps, so I had some bicep movement, so that was something new. And they were hoping that in the next 24 to 48 hours, something new would come. So 24 hours passed, 48 hours passed. Just before the 72-hour point, the emergency doctor showed up in my, little area there in intensive care. And he spoke to me and he said to me, "I think we really need to have a reality chat because you're just a little bit too positive. There's a very high probability that you will never walk again." Well, he didn't know that 20 minutes before, another doctor had come in and hooked me up to electrical stimulation for about 20 minutes, and my right toe moved. So I was thrilled. I guess that's not a big deal. If your right toe moves, it probably doesn't mean anything. But for me, I thought, okay, I'm moving in the right direction. The doctor just looked at me, and he was kind, and he just thought, like, big deal. I'm sure he was thinking in his mind, like, your toe moved, like, big deal. That doesn't mean anything else is going to move. But in any event, he spoke to me, and he said this to me. And anyway, I just said I was going to continue to move along in my mind and work at getting better. I was moved to the ward, and when I got to the ward, Paul was so kind because he had spent a few nights sleeping in a very uncomfortable chair in my room because I had no hand function and no way of paging the nurses to come in and help me when I needed their help. I had a lot of neurogenic pain. Except for the biceps, there was no way for me to page them, and I needed to be turned every hour because I had a lot of the neurogenic pain, and I had a lot of aches in my body, and I needed that turning. So Paul stayed through the night to ensure that I would be turned every hour. If the nurses didn't do it, then he would do it. It was very, very lovely of him. I guess after the third day, I had a halo vest on my head, so they had reconstructed my C4 vertebrae from bone from my hip. They had put a plate with 6 screws. I had a halo vest. You can imagine the line of my vision. It was like this, you know. So what can I see? I could see my hands. I could see my feet. So Paul was so lovely. He had gone down to Timothy's and got me a mint tea and a muffin, and he was feeding me. And I turned to him and I said, you know what, Paul, I need a manicure and a pedicure. So if you had ever seen a shocked look on a man's face, well, it was on Paul. And he looks at me and he said, Tina, you've got to be kidding. He said to me, you're paralyzed. Who in the world cares what your hands and feet look like? Well, the biggest weapon a woman has is tears. And you know what? They were not fake. The tears welled up in my eyes, and I started to cry and choke on my tears. And, you know, I had swallowing issues, too, because of my injury. So anyway, he was on the phone in 30 seconds flat. He called Tu, who was the lady manicurist, who actually lived in Richmond Hill. Here I was at Sunnybrook at Bayview. And she was in Richmond Hill, and I told him, well, you know, you have to call her, and she has to come here. And besides being on the phone for 30 seconds, while he was waiting for the phone to go through, he said, the woman works till 10 p.m. She has to take her staff home. She has to be in the store early. Where is she going to find the time? And I wasn't there. I said, you have to just call her. She was lovely. He got on the phone with her. She says, I'm coming tomorrow night, but it'll be later. Now, everybody knows that visiting hours are over at 8:30 at Sunnybrook. Well, Tu shows up with her entourage at 10:30, and the nurses stationed at Sunnybrook were not impressed. They came with buckets and all their gear, and while I was lying there, they started to do my feet. Thank God they didn't come in. I'm talking about the nurses station and kick them out. They let them do their thing. They came in. While I was lying there and they were doing my hands and feet, I thought, gee, I can't feel. Maybe I'll get them to wax my legs because I won't feel the pain. So anyway, Paul was just shaking his head the whole time. So I had that done. I thought, well, it's not fair that doctors and all the care people have to look at my hairy legs. You know, I have to have smooth legs, you know, when they're sponging me. So anyway, well, I wanted to say that we had our 18th wedding anniversary in the ward. My husband brought a very small TV that we had at home with a VHS, and my kids came and he ordered pizza, and we watched Ice Age. That was my kids' favorite movie, so we watched Ice Age together. And that's how we celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary. The next step in my recovery in the ward was to work up to being able to be seated for 1 hour in a, I guess, chair that's kind of a bed that turns into a chair, because that was the only way I would be able to endure physiotherapy at Lyndhurst. So anyway, Paul would, they'd get me transferred onto this chair, and they'd get me seated, and I'd turn green, purple. I had no abdominal muscles, and if you don't have that holding your organs, then you just feel like everything is just going to spew out of you. So I just said to him when he was wheeling me through Sunnybrook, don't listen to my complaining. Don't listen to my whining. I need to be seated for 1 hour, so keep me up for 1 hour no matter what I say to you. So anyway, he would take me through, and then after the hour was over, they'd plop me down on the bed. And fortunately, through this, I guess it was a 2.5-week period, my right toe was still moving, then my right ankle moved, and then my right leg bent. So the doctors were very excited, and they were fortunate enough to get me into Lyndhurst, even though it was high season because it was summer, within the 2.5 weeks to begin my therapy. When I arrived at Lyndhurst, they put me on quite a schedule. First of all, I met nurses and professionals that I had never encountered in my life, because except for giving birth to my children, I had not had any real health issues. And I met the warmest, most caring people that did things that I didn't know nurses had to do, but God bless them for doing it, because I needed them to do the things that they did. I'm very, very grateful, and if any of you are out there, thank you very, very much for what you do. You have no idea what you do for people. I'd like to backtrack just before Lyndhurst. Sloan Mandel came to my room when I was in the ward, and it was actually very unusual how he came. After my accident, my brothers were at my dad's place of business, because they run my dad's business in Milton, of all places. And they, it was the second day after my accident, and they were all doom and gloom, and a customer came into the restaurant part of the business, and he only comes maybe once or twice a year and sees my brothers and says, what's up? What's up, gentlemen? Why the long faces? So they told the story about what had happened to me, and he pulls out his then partner's wife's whatever card and writes down Sloan's name from Thomson Rogers and said that his wife, partner, or whoever, to this day, I'm not sure who this person is the only person that should represent your sister. He has a reputation of not only fighting for his client, but taking the client's situation very personally. He cares about the person behind the injury, and he is the one. So when he showed up in the ward, after I had my French manicure done, by the way, and he noticed my French manicure and commented on it, so that's a good thing. I noticed in his eyes that there was true compassion. So he left, and he went with Paul and my brother to have a meeting. I wasn't part of it. I was kind of clueless at that time. I was kind of spaced out with all my pain and all my things. But later on, I realized that those words that man spoke were so true, and I was truly so fortunate to have him representing me and fighting for me. With insurance companies, the other insurance company, who was a difficult one, they had a reputation on the street, and he managed my case very well, and I'm very grateful. So part of my team, which was him, with the OTs, PTs, and the nursing staff, and the case managers, I mean, he was responsible for part of that team. I'm just so grateful for what he did and the introduction. And can't wait to meet this man. I hope he drops into my dad's business while I'm there one day so I can thank him. So coming back, I showed up at Lyndhurst, and I've lost track of where my notes are, so I have to go by memory. My mornings began at 7 a.m. They'd come in and do blood work. Then they would sponge bath me, do all those bowel bladder things that they do because things don't work anymore. And then they would feed me, they'd get me dressed, and then they'd use what my father called the crane or the Hoyer lift to pull me out of the bed, put me in a chair, and I would motor to OT first at 11 a.m. for an hour. Then I'd have lunch. Then I had PT. Then after PT, there was the power assist bike, which was the only piece of equipment at Lyndhurst at the time. And then I'd crash in my bed at 4:30 and didn't want any more neurostimulation for the next couple of hours. But I didn't say that I was so blessed because my brothers alternated weeks. They would come from about 11 in the morning and stay until 1 o'clock to cheer me on in OT when I'd move a finger. They'd say, "Whoa, you moved a finger." And then when I went from sitting to standing, they'd cheer me on. So I was very grateful for their 3.5-month commitment to coming every day. When they would leave, then my dad would show up at around 5 o'clock and stay with me for another 3-4 hours, just keeping me positive. And then the last shift that would show up would be my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and bless my mother-in-law for her strength. I was always very cold after my injury. My limbs felt like frozen ice, like steel, and I could not settle at night. I was an insomniac. Wow, I talked too long. I was an insomniac. I only have 5 minutes left. I can't believe it. Anyway, she would massage my limbs so that I would settle and warm up and then be able to just rest the rest of the evening. Anyway, I got home after Lyndhurst. It was hard work at Lyndhurst, everybody knows. It's very demanding, but yet it's a place of refuge and of safety and of quiet and of peace. And then you go home, and then you have to face reality and life and how hard it is. Although it took me 20 minutes to walk out of Lyndhurst with forearm crutches, I went home, and instead of looking after everybody else, which is what moms do, driving their children to school, driving them to after-school events, going to work, supporting their husbands, keeping a household, I could do none of that. Yet everyone in my family had to come in and help me to do that. And that went on for many years, and my whole focus was physiotherapy to get better. It was all about walking, building up energy levels to do that. When I went home, showering and getting myself ready was a 4-hour ordeal, and I was done after all of that. But it was so important to me to look after my person. I didn't want to lose that, fixing my hair, putting my makeup on, and looking like a lady like I did before. So I was fortunate enough that my family allowed me to do that. So for the next few years, it was hard work. But I was hurt with a catastrophic injury, but my family was very much affected too. My husband was hit really hard because all of a sudden he had to run a household and look after kids, which he had never done before. He had no idea, and run a business. My children, all of a sudden, they had to do their own laundry, they had to get their own meals, they had to deal with grandparents taking them to events. It just changed. They had their own catastrophic injury happen to them. So it doesn't just hit the person, it hits everyone in the family. Not only are they hit this way, the family is hit financially. I can't say, but it was really, really difficult. But what I wanted to say is, with the support of OTs, PTs, and the whole medical team, and Sloan's team encouraging you and being there to support you until your settlement, those are the people that make life easier for you down the road. Before my settlement, we had to prepare for trial, and we thought we'd have to go to trial. Fortunately, we didn't have to. But, you know, he said, listen, this is what your case is worth. You need to be patient, and this is what it's worth, and this is what you're going to get. I was offered half, and I was very tempted to go with it. But he said, no, 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 you need to do this. And I'm so grateful that I waited and followed him and listened to him, because in the end, that's what I got. The number he had put down on a piece of paper was the number that I got, and my future is more secure. No matter what happens, whether I get worse, whatever happens down the road, there's a security there, and I'm very grateful. After that, I was able to start living again. Physiotherapy and everything was put aside, and now I'm starting to live. I just came back from Savannah, Georgia. I'd gone for 3 days for our 26th wedding anniversary with my husband, and it was lovely. I should tell you a joke before I close, because it's time to close. I know it is. In Savannah, Georgia, in the 1800s, there was a man named Oglethorpe who I guess ran the town. And one of his rules, besides no Catholics allowed, no Irish, no heavy, I guess, liquor was allowed, the other thing that wasn't allowed was lawyers. So I have to say that I'm very grateful that that rule doesn't exist here. And catastrophic injured individuals, clients, have access. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of your day.